Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundaries. We believe in cultivating curiosity and transformation that is rooted in profound love. The COVID-19 pandemic has irrevocably shaped how connections are formed in congregations across the United States and the world. The Church of the Larger Fellowship is committed to being a resource within Unitarian Universalism and beyond. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine Quest to our online community hub and our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community, even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison. The CLF supports the ministries of those who hold target identities: Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism; Trust, Transgender Religious UU Professionals Together; and DRUM, Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, just to name a few. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed, even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hello, welcome to today's episode of Voices of Unitarian Universalism. I'm Aisha Hauser, and I come to you from the land of the Coast Salish people, also known as Seattle, Washington, where it is cold and rainy. And we are very excited about today's show. But first, I'm going to send it to my colleague and close friend of 5 million years, Reverend Dr. Michael Tino.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Tino, joining you from Peekskill, New York, a little bit north of New York City in the Hudson Valley, the land of the Kitchewan and Wappinger people. It is a bright, beautiful... I tried to convince my child that it was warm out, and she's like, it's 48 degrees. I'm like, it's February. That's warm.
Balmy.
It is a bright, beautiful, warm for February in New York day. I'm so excited. This week it has been sunny all week, which is the first sun we've had in almost 2 months here, and it's been lovely.
So you've had Seattle weather this whole time, and I still have Seattle weather because I live in Seattle. So
Right.
cool. Our hosts are Chris is off today, and DC's not feeling well. So we are sending you our love, DC, and best wishes to feeling better soon. So today we were going to have Reverend Mike O'Sullivan from the Cork Unitarian Congregation in Ireland, in Cork, Ireland. However, they had a fire. And so it was unfortunate. My understanding is thankfully no one was hurt, but the building itself is damaged. And so Lucretia is going to put the link to the congregation in the show notes. So if you are able to support them in any way, please do. So today, instead, thanks to TikTok, I am a fan of our guest, the Reverend Arek. I was going to name post, but I will not. Reverend Arek Malecki from the Leicester congregation in Leicester Unitarian Church in England. Reverend Arek trained for ministry with the Unitarian College and studied theology, including biblical studies, biblical languages, and the study of religion at the Luther King Center in Manchester, England. He's especially interested in embodied spirituality and mystical traditions. Additionally, he is qualified as a group exercise instructor and sees exercise and physical activity as a form of spiritual practice. Amen. As a part of his dissertation research, he interviewed gym class attendees who recognize that there is something of a spiritual dimension happening in those classes. Definitely want to hear about that. Arek grew up in Arek, please pronounce where you grew up.
Wrocław, Poland.
Okay, as a member, thank you. As a member of the Roman Catholic Church and moved to the UK at the age of 18. So I'm actually not going to read the rest because I want to introduce you and have you tell the story of how you found the Unitarian faith, especially coming as a Roman Catholic from Poland at 18. So first, welcome. Thank you for saying yes. I've been following you. I don't even know how long, a while on TikTok, and I am so tickled that when I messaged you, you said yes and was so open-hearted and generous. So welcome to the VUU.
And Darby, our longtime viewer and treasurer of the Church of the Lord Your Fellowship, also follows you on TikTok. So your fans have joined you here.
I mean, hi, thanks for having me. I can't promise that it's going to be a good episode, but hey, here we are.
It's already a good episode. So tell us about your journey. I mean, I was definitely fascinated, again, when I found you on TikTok and just how you went from Roman Catholic to Unitarian minister. I'm very curious about that.
Well, so here's the thing. When you are born in Poland, you are probably born into the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, that is statistically the most likely thing to happen. I think the sort of Catholic membership in Poland shrunk a little these days, but certainly when I was a kid, we were talking 96-97% of the country were Roman Catholics. So it was kind of a given that you would be a Roman Catholic. And so when I was a kid, I was a very good altar boy, attending Catholic church. I mean, to this day, my grandma works at the vicarage. She's sort of friends with the priest, and she's very active in the life of the church. And that's always been my experience. I always grew up around the church. But I just could not square certain things of the Catholic theology with what I felt was true. Do you know what I'm trying to say by that? And one thing that people also need to understand is the Roman Catholic Church in Poland is very different to, say, Roman Catholic Church that I know from the UK. Now, in the UK, the Roman Catholic Church is just one of the minority religions. So it has to behave like a minority religion. In Poland, where you've got basically a monopoly on the religious market, and you are the religion, and there's virtually no other option, there's a lot of arrogance in it. And the marriage of church and state and corruption and everything else that goes with it. So these are the sort of the structural issues that I've had problem with. And then on the other hand, you've got personal experiences. So I'm gay, right? And homophobia in the Roman Catholic Church is just rampant, and especially in conservative countries like Poland. So I remember growing up, even though I was questioning it, sort of like logically, using my reason, I could tell that they're probably wrong, but you are only a kid. So there's still that element of, oh shit, what if they're right? What if I am going to hell? So there was that element that I sort of held in tension all the time. And I remember I was probably 14, 15, when you prepare for the sacrament of confirmation. And so at that point, you are a teenager, you know quite well who you are. And you attend all those classes. And I just remember the priest being super homophobic and basically telling us that we're all going to hell. And he also explained that the sacrament of confirmation is like God's seal on your heart. So God is going to put a seal on your heart. And even if you will be condemned to go to hell, you know, not everything is lost. There's still some hope, because that seal on your heart will be burnt. You know, there will be like a permanent symbol of God on you. And I thought, do you know what? That's gonna be my insurance policy. I'm just gonna get that, and that will be the last time Roman Catholic Church will see me attending one of their services. And that's what I did. So I I saw it through to the confirmation, just in case. You know, you can never be too sure. And then I stopped going. And I was also questioning things like Catholic religion is taught at public schools. This is not a religious education. This is a Sunday class. This is basically a catechism, or catechesis, rather. You can opt out. You can opt out by all means, but this is the default. And I remember we had a lay teacher, and she used to say to us things like, if we light incense sticks, you know, the little ones that you can just buy from, you know, home department stores and stuff, we worship demons, because these sticks come from Eastern traditions. And as we all know, fact, the deities of Eastern traditions are really just demons repackaged. So every time you light that incense, you just worship a demon. And we used to argue with her as school kids. You know, we were quite obnoxious teenagers, my group of friends. We used to argue back. Like, how dare you say things like that about people, sort of good people who just have different religion, were brought up in a different culture to you. You know, I just could not square it. So I reacted very much against it. And I was, an atheist doesn't quite cut it. I was an anti-religious person. I was quite arrogant, saying, oh, you know, religion is the source of all the evil in the world and all the problems in the world. And basically everything is just lullabies for adults. And if you can do some critical thinking, then obviously you wouldn't be engaging in any religion at all. And that was me sort of from the age of 16 to maybe 18, 19. But then I've realized that something was happening in me. And that something was that I would be meditating or praying, but I was very reluctant to say the word prayer, because to my mind, prayer was a set formula that you just say in the church, you know, So I thought, it's not a prayer. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. I don't think I'm praying. Maybe I'm meditating. But again, what is meditation? When you meditate, do you just like levitate on a cloud of holiness? What even is meditation? Yeah, but I developed this kind of weird spirituality that I practiced on my own, and I didn't know what to call it. And I used to practice it going for walks, say long walks in nature, listening to music, sometimes just sitting at home and kind of doing like a little bit of mindfulness. I don't know, holding a fragrant cup of tea or some wine, you know, just some kind of mindfulness like that. And I started testing out things on my own. Oh yeah, I would read a Buddhist meditation. I would listen to Christian choral music, which I always found very uplifting, very sort of spiritually rich. And I was happy with this sort of eclectic spirituality. And at one point, I even had an idea of starting my own church, because I was getting a bit sort of bored of doing it on my own. And I thought, do you know what? If there was only a group of people who are just happy to try things out and don't want to confine themselves to just one thing, and are able to see the same beauty or the same God, or however you want to call it, in all those approaches, then I want to be with those people. But I didn't know that such people existed until someone on my Facebook shared a link to, you've guessed it, Belief-O-Matic quiz. And the rest is history.
So the Unitarians in the UK do just as good a job of hiding themselves as the Unitarian Universalists in North America do?
Oh yeah, the best kept secret in town, in every town. But we also have historical reasons for it. A lot of our chapels are actually physically hidden. And it comes from the times when it was illegal to be a non-conformist. So there are chapels like, say, Little Chapel in Macclesfield, chapel in Doncaster is like that, where you have to go through a little sort of, we call it a ginnel, like a tunnel in between shops, somewhere into someone's backyard. And then there, you've got a big opening, and the chapel stands there. Unless you know that it's there, you will never find it. Because, historically, they needed to hide those buildings. And it's still with us.
Wow. I do want you to talk about so how did you took the test, the online test, and then you realized that you fit best with the Unitarian faith. Now in the England, it is not Unitarian Universalism, it is Unitarianism. It's Unitarian, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And then did you find your local, is this the congregation where you are now, or you found a local church and then you had a call to go to seminary?
So it's not where I am now, because I'm a minister in Leicester, which is bang in the middle of England. At the time, I used to live in Leeds, which is in Yorkshire, north of England. And yeah, so after that sort of quiz, I had something like 99% match with Unitarian Universalism. And I thought, what is that? What sort of weird invention is it? But I started reading about it, and I thought, oh yeah, that sounds like me. And then my next question was, oh, I wonder if there is a Unitarian church anywhere in the UK. I had no idea that we've got about 180 of them, all over UK. So I Googled it, and it turned out that the church that I've been walking past every day pretty much is a Unitarian church. And I'll tell you what is the reason why I never clicked that it was a Unitarian church. Now, at the time, that church, which, by the way, the church in Leeds is a very sort of, it looks like a cathedral. It's a big Victorian church with stained glass windows, mosaics. It looks like a Catholic or Church of England church. So I always presumed that it's a kind of redundant church. And the reason why I thought it like that was they used to have this blue signage outside that said something like one world, one God, one people. And they had a round sign with all the sort of faith symbols around it and the flaming chalice in the middle. Now, the problem was that the shade of blue and the font used was basically the same as the city council was using for advertising everything else. So I put two and two together, and I thought, oh, okay, so it's some sort of old church that got closed. Local council took sort of ownership of it and reopened it as some sort of multi-faith chapel. That was my reasoning. So I never really paid attention to it. I just thought it's just another city building. Yeah. But I just braved a visit one day, and yeah, here we are. Sorry, go on.
That's awesome. I wanted you, before we went on there, you talked about the difference between, I want you to repeat that, what you how you view or the difference between Unitarian Universalism in the United States and Unitarianism in England. I think that was a really helpful framing for me to understand the positionality of the faiths. So if you, yeah.
So when we talk about differences, I think the main one that we always have to name is the sheer size. I was listening to one of your podcasts and someone said, oh yeah, I'm a minister to a very small congregation under 150 members. And I just laughed out loud. I'm like, we haven't got a church of 70 members maybe, or maybe there's one in London that's about 80 or 90. And that is our mega church. They don't get any bigger than this. When I was training for ministry, our college used to invite speakers from the US sometimes, UU ministers to lead some sessions over Zoom. And one time we had, I'm pretty sure it was Reverend Tandy Richards. I'm pretty sure it was her. Maybe it was somebody else who was lead. That's right. My apologies. That's right.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
And she was talking about sort of congregational dynamics. And she said, oh yeah, we're just going to start by mapping the area sort of by size of the congregation. And she said, Well, first of all, we've got those what we call the mouse congregations, anything under 50 people. And we just looked at each other here in the classroom and like, anything under 50 people, that's basically every church in the UK. So obviously the sort of the sheer size or the scale of our operations is different. But then I suppose the most significant difference is our wider socio-cultural context. And that is something that really hasn't occurred to me until I started engaging with VUUs from the United States on TikTok. And it's mainly the relationship between Unitarian Universalism over in the United States and the Christian context, and what we do here, and the relationship of our Unitarians to the wider Christian context. And, in both cases, yes, we do have people of various faiths and none, and people who identify as atheists and sort of liberal Christian and pagan and Hindu and, you name it. But I think the wider social-cultural context is such that over in the United States, you have a de facto Christian country. The fact that Christian religion is brought in houses of, in senates or in, sort of, forgive my ignorance, but like kind of local parliaments, the sort of local sessions is just mind-blowing to me. Because over here, we have de jure Christianity, or sort of our country is de jure Christian country. I mean, we have the king, who is the governor of the state church. We have bishops, Church of England bishops, who sit in the House of Lords, so the upper chamber of the parliament. And yet the country is de facto secular. So there's that weird sort of dynamic that you don't have over there. So our dynamic here is that the country is by far secular. I mean, the latest census was that something like over 50% of the country identifies as having no religion, or something like that, if I remember rightly. Which is why our relationship with Christianity is very different. I mean, yes, there is, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Yes, there are sort of right-wing Christian groups here, absolutely, but they are not that powerful. They are not that prominent. And a lot of churches, even Church of England, yes, they are lagging behind on things like same-sex marriage and, some other ridiculous things. And there are some churches that still will not have a woman minister. But yet, by and large, they are sort of centrist, leftist kind of on the scale. And I think because of that, we are much more comfortable with a sort of the Christian label, even though individual Unitarians will not be Christians necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yes. We have a lot of folks who won't sign the book. Like, we'll go to congregations for years and years and will be part of the community, but won't officially join. So yeah, that whole thing, it sounds like that's similar to us too. But I think the point you had made earlier was something to the effect of that Unitarian UUism here in the United States is reactionary to the evangelical movement, where in England it's not quite. It's not as there's nothing to react to in that same way as we have here as kind of a counter.
Well, I think what we are reacting to is lack of spirituality. The default for most of the people that I meet, the default is having no faith. And then what tends to happen is these are the people who are then sort of trapped, for want of a better word, in the kind of a life that feels a bit hectic because it kind of lacks meaning, or you find meaning in your career, or you find meaning in, I don't know, hedonism. And I don't mean that word sort of in a negative sense, but you kind of, you leave because you want to have fun, which is absolutely fine. But then, at some point, you may feel like you're lacking something, and you lack something because you lack that sort of spiritual grounding. So what we are trying to say is, hey, look, there is a kind of church that can offer you a spiritual practice, or where you can find your own spiritual practice without necessarily having to subscribe to dogmas, without having to declare to believe in this or that. So I think, yeah, our task here is more to reach to the nones, people who say that they are of non-religion, rather than kind of shelter people from the right-wing religious movements.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I also thank you for that. And I also want to veer into your work as a fitness instructor, and the I appreciated how you frame the, it's a holistic approach to spirituality and life. And so talk a little bit about that. That's pretty cool.
Again, it was something that really came to the surface when I was training for ministry. Because we were in lockdown, or we were during the pandemic, everything was happening on Zoom, everything was happening in the same space. My only excuse to leave home was to go to the gym. And there were sort of times where we had different restrictions. Sometimes you could go to the gym, but you had to exercise on your own. Other times, some group exercise classes were re-established, or they've started doing exercise classes again. But you could only have limited number of people because everybody had to be really spaced out in those studios. And that became like my spiritual practice. And so was, I said at the beginning, when I was of non-religion and I had sort of my own spirituality, my meditation was going for long walks. And then something clicked and I thought, aha, so bodily engagement is a form of spiritual practice for me because it keeps me grounded. I've realized I don't go to those spaces like gyms to get jacked. I really couldn't care less if I've lost some weight or not. Like, that was never sort of a motivating factor for me. What was motivating me was how it felt, not for my body, but how my soul felt afterwards or during, because suddenly all the intellectual muddle and all those things that you were reading about or thinking about, that was getting quiet. You could sort of settle in and just really feel alive. And I thought, oh, this is it. But I thought, I'm just being silly, and I'm probably the only person in the world doing that. You cannot be serious. And then by pure chance, it turned out that one of my yoga teachers, and she was also teaching a few other classes, we started chatting. It turned out that she's actually a theologian. She has a PhD in Margaret Porret. If you're listening to it, Rebecca, hi. So she's got PhD in mystic Margaret Porret and all the sort of mystical movements. So that's very much along what she's interested in. And we started chatting. And yeah, and then I discovered that I'm not the only person sort of considering bodily engagement, exercise. And it doesn't necessarily apply to things like yoga. People tend to think, oh, yoga is very spiritual. Yes, it can be, but your aerobics class can be too. Your strength class can be too. It's all about that bodily engagement. So I decided to pursue it further. And then I qualified to be a gym instructor as well. I started teaching my own classes. And then what happened was people coming to my classes started chatting to me at the end. And, at first you don't know who they are. You just know them as people who come to your classes. And then you make a chit chat, you have a small talk with them, or what do you do? Oh, I train for ministry. You what? Yeah, I train to be a church minister. Oh, and then that opens a whole new sort of avenues for you to talk to people. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I had deeper spiritual conversations somewhere by the weights at the gym than I had in churches. Because of that, because you've got that sort of physical release, sort of rush of endorphins, it feels good. You can put your mind to one side and you allow yourself to feel how you really are. And then you've got someone like this guy who's training to be a church minister to talk to. And I was just fascinated by it.
Do you preach from... Go ahead, Michael.
I'm just going to say there are so many places, so many... I lost my train of thought. like especially in places that have been Christianized, because I think it goes deep into Christian history and theology, where our bodies and our spirits and our psyches are considered like different things, and they're not integrated into who we are. And I think that there are many spiritual traditions in the world, and one of the beauties of being Unitarian or Unitarian Universalist is that we get to actually learn from indigenous spiritual traditions, from African spiritual traditions, um, from Asian spiritual traditions, um, that never separated those things, right? That never said you somehow who you are is like these separate pieces that don't touch. And I think it's something that we're working on here too. Is like how 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 does my body inform my spirituality? It's certainly a big part of conversation I have with disabled folks,
Yeah.
with the fat liberation community, in terms of like, I am in this body, and this body exists in this world. We talk a lot about rest as resistance, and like the need to pay attention to your body when it needs rest. So I love that you're connecting those things for the folks there too. um, and I don't really have a question.
Um, yeah, no, but I absolutely agree with you. And I think this is why also sort of slightly changing the subject, but not quite. This is why I think rituals are so hugely important. And I think we Unitarians, I'm talking about certainly some British Unitarians, we are sometimes guilty of feeling afraid of ritual, thinking, oh no, it's brujeria. We are not doing this. It's we are rational faith, head. And I'm thinking, no, we are not just brain on sticks. This is me. This body is me. And also, I think it really works for or certainly certain neurodiversities, because it engages your body. I mean, gym class is an extreme example of that, but mala beads, rosaries, these are physical activities, something that you can do to kind of engage your mind. And I think effectively, this is what a gym class does. It, it gives you something to do so that your mind becomes quiet. When we go to our General Assembly meetings, there's always somewhere on the back row, there's always a row of people crocheting, because it's an activity. The hands are busy, the minds are focused. And I think effectively that's what it is.
I have a practical question, changing the subject again, because one of the big things that we are at the CLF, every congregation, is about fundraising. And I'm thinking, if you all have these amazing stone buildings, you have 50 to 80 people in a congregation, how you all raise money? How are you all like, I'm just curious, like, inquiring minds want to know how that, do you get subsidized by the government? Like, how does that, it feels, and how do you sustain that? I mean, if one of the things we unfortunately come from, we have a very scarcity mentality here in the United States because it's dominated by white supremacy culture, although England is the OG white supremacy culture. But so scarcity is a thing, and I'm just super curious on just the practical parts of how you all, you said 150 congregations in the UK, which I didn't realize it was that many, or 180. How that works, how you all have sustain yourselves financially.
So it varies, and you are right that this is probably one of the biggest issues that we face. And it varies from congregation to congregation because I suppose just like in the US, each congregation is an independent entity. Yes, we are kind of under our General Assembly umbrella, but ultimately we are financially independent from them. So we do not get any sort of central funding. We certainly do not get anything from the government. And well, it varies, but I would say for a lot of churches, they live off the old Victorian money. So there was a heap of money left by the people during the Victorian time because there were entrepreneurs, slave owners, plantation owners. We are unpacking that. And the Hibbert Trust, which is one of the Unitarian trusts set up by a chap called Hibbert, I forgot his first name, he made a lot of his money on plantations. And this is the trust now who funds ministry training. So effectively, my ministry training was paid for by money from slavery. But the thing is that they are being very transparent about it and sort of trying to work out, okay, so what do we do about it? How can we make sure that the money that were accumulated in this way are of use for the marginalized communities? What are the ways of using that money? So that's one thing. I'm going on a tangent here. So old money, so Victorian money from wherever they came. Then you've got buildings. So churches may own adjacent buildings, which they let to shops or commercial buildings. So for example, here in Leicester, we've got our chapel. I'm currently sitting in our community room, the garden room, and next door, we have our old schoolhouse. It's a big building that is currently hired out to our NHS. So this is the National Health Service, and it's a GP practice, doctor's practice. So the income from this commercial rental is effectively what pays my wage as the minister and sustains the building. Other chapels may have some other assets, I don't know, some patch of land in the city centre, and they may hire it out as a car park or car park spaces, so these are all the sort of different models of fundraising. I don't think realistically there is a congregation that could rely solely on donations. I mean, even for us, donations are just a small fraction of what we really need to operate, even in terms of paying our bills. So if it wasn't for the building that we have next door, we would probably be closing our doors.
Wow. So I guess I'm kind of trying to picture what it's like in a Unitarian congregation where, here we skew in general older, but we do have vibrant generational congregations. We have a vibrant youth program depending on the congregation, and children's programs. So do you attract families? I know you said Unitarianism is the best kept secret in the UK. It is here too, although we're bigger than the UK. But what are the ways that do you do community engagement? And then I also follow-up question want to ask about Our Whole Lives. Do you have the OWL sex ed program in the UK? Because I'd be happy to come train you all. So I'm one of the OWL trainers. But just, I guess I'm asking in general about engagement and how you reach out to the community. I follow your TikTok, and I know I think that's a great tool, by the way. If I lived anywhere near you, I'd be at your church. But I'm curious about community engagement in general.
It is difficult because I am the only member of staff here. That's it. When I've learned that there are UU churches over in the US that have more than one member of staff that have admins, religious educators, mind blown. Where do you get your money from? How are you able to afford that? I've never heard of it. So things that are happening here are more or less what I'm able to do. Yes, of course, we've got a group of volunteers, fantastic. I'm really blessed with my congregation here because I think I was very lucky to land them because they do put a lot of work and we have a lot of doers here. But, when your congregation is, I think I've got something like 35 people here, and Sunday attendance, on a good Sunday, I may have about 30. On a quiet Sunday, I may have 15. If these are the people that I have available, there's only a limited number of things that we are able to do. Those people have families, those people have jobs, or they may be retired, so they don't have as much energy, or they may be volunteering somewhere else. I've got a couple of people who also work at the hospice. So I have to be very careful not to burn our people out. So as much as I'd love to just go out and go, let's just do everything, guys, I have to be realistic about it. So our next sort of big things here coming up is, soon we're going to have Ramadan. We're going to have a big iftar feast here, so breaking of the fast with our Muslim neighbors, which, we are just in the stage of planning. There are other things like sometimes we invite choirs from outside. Just before Christmas, we had dementia-friendly carol concerts organized by a community group that works with people with dementia and memory loss. But like I said, we kind of try to do ad hoc things that we can afford and that we have energy for. And it's a very frustrating position to be in because everybody here would like to do more. Yeah, but we just have to be realistic.
Do you know Our Whole Lives? Do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about that? It's our comprehensive sexuality education program started by here. You do know or no?
I mean, I have heard about it, but I don't know any details.
Ah, okay. Then never mind. So I was going to ask if you offer it, so clearly not. But it is
the people, we could offer them, but I dare say that the people in my congregation are more experienced than I am. in this sense, purely because they are at least twice my age. I mean, I am the youngest person here.
Oh, wow. So do you
I'm
have
pretty
colleagues
sure they know
near
about
you?
those things. Sorry?
Do you have colleagues near you? Do you have a network of colleagues that you meet with?
My nearest colleague is in a small town called Hinckley, which is about 12 or 13 miles away. And I'm lucky enough that he's actually my mate. We used to go to the same church in Leeds because he used to live in Leeds as well. So we used to worship in the same church. Then he went to do his ministry training. And about a year later, I went to do my ministry training. And then now we both ended up in Midlands, virtually next door to each other. So yes, we are in touch, me and Robin. And we occasionally meet and we certainly chat with one another. And yeah, we are plotting things. We are trying to see if there's a way of maybe finding a community worker that could be shared between the two congregations. But then the big question mark is, where would we get money from? Are there any sort of sources of money or pots of money that we don't know about that maybe we could hire someone for a year or two and see how it goes? But these are all big question marks and yeah, very early in the planning stages.
So the Hebert Fund that I want to notice, I have a noticing about that. When you immediately said that money, that big pot of money came from the slave trade, I will tell you that people here, Unitarians here, we have congregations, I would say predominantly in New England, and that have big pots of endowments, a lot of money that did also result from profits from the slave trade. But literally, it is very rare. I've maybe heard two people say it. So I was appreciating that this is something that is acknowledged, is open. You said it, with where here there's a lot of angst about it because when we talk about racism and anti-Blackness and the legacy of which we are very much living with in the United States and the world of violent extractive capitalism and chattel slavery, what do reparations look like? We have white people in this country and in the UK have a lot of money because as a result of the empire, the British Empire, and then violent extractive capitalism. So I met Reverend Winnie, and forgive me for not remembering her last name, a Black Unitarian minister. Thank you. Yes, she was so great. And she talked about, I said to her, I met her shortly after the white supremacy teach-in here in maybe I met her in 2018, 2017. Anyway, she talked about how in the UK, the anti-racism conversation is not quite as alive as it is in the United States. So I was curious that you did talk about the legacy of slavery and that money, but yet she indicated to me that the conversation that white people in the UK do not think racism exists in the way it does here, even though y'all are the OG.
I mean, She's right. You know,
Yeah.
she's right. I don't want to dispute that. And I think also what makes it worse is the culture of niceness here. Yeah, I think I don't have to say anything more about that, right? We just British people are reserved. They just don't like to talk about things, or you know, by and large, they prefer to, yeah, just to keep certain things to themselves. So no, Winnie is absolutely correct. But for Hibbert Trust, they have been very transparent about it, and they've been doing this work for quite some time now. You know, and one of the sort of the first steps that they took when they realized that, oh shit, there's that problem that we don't talk about, and how do we address it? One of the first things that they did was rename one of the meeting rooms we have in our Peak District in Derbyshire, a big sort of like a Unitarian conference center and kind of mini hotel and that kind of stuff. Rename one of the meeting rooms from Hibbert to Seacole, honoring Mary Seacole. You know, have you heard of her? So basically, two famous nurses in the UK are sort of mothers of modern nursing. Florence Nightingale and Mary Seacole, both alive around the same time, except everybody knows about Florence Nightingale, but no one knows about Mary Seacole because she's black. So Nightingale Centre, where the Hibbert Room was, now renamed that room, the Hibbert Room, to Seacole Room, which makes sense to have Seacole Room in Nightingale Centre, right? So that was one of the sort of first symbolic things that they've done. I mean, in real life, for people living now, that means nothing, right? This is just a symbolic gesture. That means very little. But yeah, they are doing this work of unpacking and kind of asking questions. What next? How can we handle it well?
Are you part of those conversations, or in what ways are those conversations inviting folks like Reverend Winnie or other folks? You're a gay man. Like, in what ways is it happening intentionally?
I mean, I'm not sure about Hibbert Trust because I'm actually banned from engaging with it because it's not me personally, but it's specifically a trust operated by lay people because it supports ministry. In their constitution, it says that sort of trustees must be lay people. They must not have reverence. So that's what I mean, you know, when I'm banned from it, that's what I mean. I'm just, you know, by the virtue of being a rev, I'm not sort of involved with the Hibbert Trust. But yes, I cannot really comment on that because I don't have enough knowledge.
Gotcha. You just know that it's happening. So what are some of the things? Yeah, what are some of the things that you all do when you get together for General Assembly? Do you meet once a year?
Yes, we meet once a year in April. So it's usually a week before Easter or a week after Easter. So this year it's week after Easter. Probably same as you. We sing, we worship, we eat, we have breakout sessions, we catch up with people that we've not seen for an entire year or sometimes longer. We stay at the bar for way too long and then we regret it the following morning. So I suppose it's the same as your General Assembly, you know, nothing shocking.
No. Okay. And how many people usually attend?
My wild guess would be something between 300, maybe 400.
Okay. So almost every Unitarian in the UK. No.
Yeah, pretty much. I was gonna say, so the size of your average congregation.
Is there anything you're wondering about us? Like, not, I mean, it's so funny that we're in the same, I mean, you know, we're cousins, I think, because we do, I mean, for me, I probably identify more as a Universalist than I do a Unitarian. Like, I don't have any attachment of how many gods people are into. I mean, I'm mostly an agnostic, but just in terms of the universal love part and the affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person is something I relate to much more strongly. And so I'm curious if you have wondered anything about, and maybe not. I didn't ask you this beforehand, which I should have, but I'm curious if things come up for you.
How many churches do you actually have across
Over
the country?
1,000, right, Michael?
Yeah, in the United States and Canada, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100.
Yeah. And are they more or less equally spread across the country? Have you got clusters where there's more of you and some places where
Yeah,
there's not so
there
many of you?
certainly are. There certainly are clusters. There are probably as many churches in the Boston metropolitan area as in like the Mountain Time Zone,
Yeah.
for example.
we're
So
very- yeah.
definitely there are clusters, mostly around cities.
Yeah. Oh. No, I'm just, every time I sort of engage, but like I said, mostly through TikTok with American UUs, I'm just blown away by the size of the operation. And I don't mean numerical size. I just mean all the wonderful things that you are able to do simply because there's more of you, and that is
Yeah.
something that I'm kind of quietly jealous of. Because like I said, here we are eager to go, but also we just have to be realistic with what we've got. But can I also just say, because you've used a very interesting phrase here, and I'm changing the subject back to Unitarian versus Universalism, or Unitarianism versus Universalism. You said you identify as mostly universalist because you don't really care about the number of gods that people believe in, and the Unitarianism bit. If you ever come to the UK and you come across a free Christian church, that's probably a Unitarian church. That's probably one of ours. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Wow.
So the full name of our denomination actually here is the General Assembly of Unitarian and Free Christian Churches. And there are a lot of churches across the UK that would call themselves Unitarian and Free Christian. And the interesting thing about it is the phrase free Christian was coined by James Martineau. You might have heard his name, one of the most prominent theologians of the 19th century. That's right, 19th. Who proposed this phrase free Christian church, because obviously back then, Christianity was still the religion, everybody was Christian, and that's it. Because he said, well, Unitarianism is a dogmatic position. If you really want to be free to believe how your conscience dictates to you, then you are a free Christian. So originally, that term was meant to be more progressive, more open. So some churches were like, oh yeah, Unitarianism is a doctrine. Now we're just going to start calling ourselves free Christians because we want to be more progressive. And it's funny how today the understanding of this phrase shifted, because you'd be forgiven to think that a free Christian church would be possibly a liberal Christian, but Christian nonetheless. But that's not kind of how it was meant to be at the start. But nonetheless, we are kind of stuck with this name. So yeah, you are Unitarian Universalists, and we are Unitarians and Free Christians.
Well, and in the U.S., there was a movement, especially in the 19th century, but into the 20th century, that was the free religious movement. That was part of Unitarianism that probably paralleled that. They went free religious. So
Yeah.
was not to limit them, but they didn't win the naming battle. So like their name just sort of disappeared, even if their ethos stayed.
So a little bit like the Universalists over here, the reason why we don't say Universalism is not because we have a beef with Universalism or anything like that. It's just because we never had that many Universalists to start with. So it kind of just dwindled out.
And you all drove John Murray over to the States, so
yeah.
You weren't into John. We have a whole story about him. We are. I mean, I will say what I'm proud about UUs here in the United States is we tend to lean toward activism, and so right now there are over 300 bills attacking trans people, trans children, because this country is absurd. And the people in power are absurd. And so the Unitarians will, like my shirt, my faith is love, protect trans kids is my t-shirt that I'm wearing. And I try to wear it in airports mostly. And we do marriage equality. We had a big movement to where we organize and work really hard to try to impact the world around us. So, and it is, to your point, I mean, in reaction to the evangelical Christians who disproportionately influence and are in our federal and a lot of local governments, depending on the state you're in. And so I think that's, a big, I so appreciate that about who we are and how we want to be in the world. At the CLF, the three of us, Christina Rivera, our co-lead, along with Michael and I, the three of us are very clear about our centering liberation, and that we're here to, work for center love and work for collective liberation, because if all of us aren't free, none of us are free, right? So I wonder, I guess, we have 5 minutes left. So I want you to say anything you haven't said, but I am curious how political you get, if you do at all, in terms of your congregation and your ministry.
Oh, yes. And I think we are absolutely not an apolitical movement here. We may not be party political, you will have people supporting different political parties, of course you will. But, even in the UK, we Unitarians, together with Quakers and liberal Jews, the reason why we've got equal marriage in the UK is because we lobbied for it. We are quite present as all the climate justice sort of events. There was one held in one of our London churches only this past weekend, which was a big success from what I've heard. So we are constantly active, as well as sort of campaigning for people in the Palestine now. But again, everything that we do is kind of done in proportion to our size. So we may have big aspirations, but we also, we've had successes like the equal marriage. So we are certainly not giving up. We are certainly trying to be active. But we are not holding our breath. But hope is there. Hope is always there. The big question that we are asking ourselves now is sort of what our next big step would be. So climate justice, that's ongoing. Genocide in Palestine, that's ongoing. So we don't want to park those things on the side, but also projecting to the future for the UK, for people locally here. We kind of think that perhaps algorithmic justice and sort of working out the ins and outs of the ethicality of AI, as well as universal basic income, is the big item of our agenda, sort of collective agenda next for local people. So that's
Arek, you universal basic income. I have been, and you already have universal healthcare. We do not have that, so that is the other one that I have been on a mission. We are so thrilled. This was so great. Thank you so much for saying yes. And I was thinking maybe you and I could do a TikTok live one of these days. I'm like,
let's do it.
Yeah, that would be so fun. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will have you on again for sure. And I'm going to be in the UK, so I will visit you. I'm so excited about that too. I will keep you posted.
Hop in for a cup of tea.
Yes, please. And I learned, you all almost, I know it's English technically, but I learned pudding. It doesn't mean pudding, like it means dinner or something. I don't know. It has a whole. Anyway, we can talk about the. So thank you for
depending where you are in the country, tea can also mean dinner.
Oh,
so
nice.
Tea
That's
isn't necessarily tea. It can also mean dinner. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Michael and Arek, thank you so much. This was a great show. I could listen to you for hours. This was so engaging and fun. And thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you next week on The VUU. Ciao.
Thank you.
We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.